He should have died that night. A storm raged through the Colorado mountains, ice slicing like knives, trees howling in protest, and there, collapsed in the snow like a discarded shadow, was a German shepherd, alone, bleeding, frozen to the bone. No name, no hope, until an 8-year-old boy opened the door. What followed wasn't just a rescue. It was a bond that defied instinct, memory, even death. A forgotten hero, a grieving child, and a storm that brought them together. This is the story of Jasper, and what happened next will echo in your heart long after the snow melts. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments. And if you believe in loyalty, in second chances, in the quiet power of love, between a boy and a dog, hit that subscribe button. Because this story, it's going to stay with you forever. Grand Mesa, Colorado, midwinter. The wind screamed down from the high ridges like something wounded and wild. Snow fell in ragged, sideways sheets, piling high on sloped log cabin roofs and burying every road in white silence. It was the kind of night that shut doors, silenced radios, and made even the bravest mountain folks think twice before stepping outside. But one light still burned on the edge of the forest, flickering through the window of a weathered cabin clinging to the mountain like a secret. Inside, Wyatt Turner, an 8-year-old boy with shaggy chestnut hair and oversized flannel pajamas, pressed his face to the window. His breath fogged the glass, but he wouldn't look away. Something tugged at him, something just beyond the darkness. Wyatt had the wiry frame of a child raised among trees and wind, his cheeks always pink from cold, his wide hazel eyes always scanning, searching. Since the avalanche last year that took his parents, Wyatt had stopped asking questions aloud. But he never stopped listening. Behind him, June Turner, his paternal grandmother, stirred a pot of venison stew on the wood stove. June was in her early 70s, small and wiry, her silver hair always in a tight bun. Years of mountain life had carved deep lines into her face, but her eyes were sharp, ice blue and unblinking. A retired school teacher, June had been firm but fair with generations of Glenmore children. Grief had made her quieter, but not cold. Her love for Wyatt was fierce, if quiet like everything else she did. "You shouldn't be up so late, Wyatt," she said without turning. "The storm's not going to ease up tonight." Wyatt didn't answer. He pressed his hand against the window pane. "There's something out there." June looked over, tired. "Ain't nothing but wind and snow tonight, sweetheart." But then came the sound. Not a howl, not a growl. Something in between. Low, strained, cut short, like a breath frozen halfway. June put down the ladle. Wyatt was already pulling on his boots. Outside, the world was a blur of white in motion. The wind slapped Wyatt's face with icy fingers as he stepped from the porch, flashlight tight in his mittened hand. He scanned the snow, heart pounding, until the beam caught something, a mound just off the trail. At first it looked like a pile of fallen branches, but then it moved, it gasped. It was a dog, a large one, maybe the biggest he'd ever seen, half buried in snow, one side trembling, the other death still. Its coat was black and tan, matted, with ice. A German shepherd, powerfully built, with thick shoulders, flattened ears. But what stopped Wyatt weren't the size or the markings. It was the eyes. Amber-colored, dulled by pain, but watching, alert. Wyatt dropped to his knees, snow soaking through his pajamas. "Hey, boy. Hey, it's okay." The dog gave a weak whine. Wyatt reached for the collar, barely holding on, frayed and caked with frozen mud. Attached was a small rusted tag. He rubbed it with his thumb. Jasper. Scratched, faded, but unmistakable. "Jasper," Wyatt whispered. "Is that your name?" A half growl, half sigh followed, as if in agreement. "Hang on, I'll get help." By the time June reached them with a wool blanket and flashlight of her own, Wyatt had already draped his coat over the dog's back. She hesitated, instincts screaming danger. But something in the dog's eyes softened her. "You sure about this?" she asked. "He's hurt, Grandma. We can't leave him. He has a name." The dog whimpered softly. June exhaled. "All right, but he stays in the mudroom. And keep your hands away from that muzzle till we know he ain't rabid." Together, they pulled him inside, Wyatt guiding, June dragging the back legs onto the blanket. The dog was heavy, 80 pounds or more, and limp with cold. Inside, near the fire, they made a nest of old quilts. Heat hit him like a tidal wave. Jasper didn't move at first, just blinked. Then slowly, he lowered his head onto Wyatt's knee. June watched the exchange in silence, then brought a small bowl of warm broth. "Don't let him gulp too much. If he's been out long, his stomach won't take it." Wyatt nodded, stroking the frozen fur. "He's going to be okay now." Behind them, the radio crackled. Static, then a voice. Peter Mayfield, their neighbor 2 cabins down, had left his emergency band open. The signal wasn't clear, but the words cut through. "Unit 14, missing 3 weeks. German Shepherd. Name, Jasper." June froze. Wyatt didn't even hear her. His hand rested over the slow but steady heartbeat beneath the fur. "You're home now, Jasper," he whispered. "You're safe." The storm raged on outside, but inside, for the first time in months, Wyatt felt something thaw. The next morning broke pale and frozen. Light from a cloud-choked sky filtered through frosted windows. Snow still drifted across the porch, but the worst had passed, leaving a stillness like breath held between verses of a forgotten song. Inside, Wyatt sat cross-legged near the fireplace, watching Jasper with the kind of intensity only children know. The dog had barely moved, save for the shallow rise and fall of his chest. Wyatt had covered him with a thick wool blanket, tucking in the corners like Grandma did with quilts. Jasper's eyes remained half-lidded, amber beneath crusted lashes. Occasionally his ears twitched, but he didn't bark, didn't growl, just existed, quiet, heavy, near. Wyatt reached out, touched his leg. The fur was coarse and damp. Beneath it, hidden under clumps of matted hair and dried blood, was a wound, deep, jagged across the front right paw. Not fresh, not healed. He took the towel he'd left soaking in warm water and pressed it gently to the injury. Jasper flinched, but didn't pull away. "You're tough," Wyatt whispered, "like you've been through worse than snow." From the kitchen, June watched silently, leaning against the counter, coffee mug in hand. She didn't interrupt, but every few minutes, her eyes flicked toward the old shotgun by the door. Not out of fear, but habit. By midday, Jasper tried to stand. Trembling limbs, one paw tucked close to his chest. "Easy," Wyatt said, rushing forward. "Just rest." Jasper looked at him, long, deliberate, then lay back down, resting his head on the boy's knee. Wyatt smiled. Later, the crunch of tires on snow signaled a visitor. A rusty green pickup pulled up beside the cabin. Peter Mayfield stepped out. Late 60s, broad-shouldered, wind-chapped with a canvas coat and a faded forest ranger patch on one arm. He hadn't knocked. June opened the door before he could. "Morning, Peter. Snow finally gave us a break," he said, stamping his boots. "Heard your radio was still on. Thought I'd check in." She nodded. "We've had a visitor." Peter paused in the doorway, eyes landing on the dog curled near the fire. "Well, I'll be damned." Wyatt turned. "This is Jasper." Peter knelt beside the dog, slowly, respectfully. No touch, just a careful study. German Shepherd, male, military or rescue trained from the look of him. "You see that stance? Even hurt, he's alert. I found his name on his collar, Wyatt. It was really faded." Peter nodded. "Heard that name a few weeks back, old ranger frequency. Team in Gunnison lost a rescue dog during a landslide. Highly trained. Name was Jasper." "You think this is him?" June asked. "Don't know," Peter said, "but if it is, that dog's been through hell. Survived miles in the mountains, maybe weeks on his own. That kind of endurance. It's rare." "Do you think he remembers his team?" Wyatt asked. "Hard to say, but dogs don't forget pain or kindness." Peter left an hour later, promising to check with old contacts. But before he left, the way he looked at the dog, like he knew something big was beginning, left June quietly uneasy. That night, Jasper made it halfway across the room before collapsing again. Wyatt helped him up, using a rolled blanket. The dog no longer flinched from his touch. When Wyatt brought a bowl of leftover stew, mostly broth, Jasper sniffed, then began to eat. Slow, careful bites. June watched from the rocker, knitting in her lap. "He's choosing to stay," she said softly. "What do you mean?" Wyatt asked. She met his eyes. Animals know when it's time to die. If he wanted to, he could have crawled into the woods and gone quiet. But he came here, to you. Wyatt didn't answer. He just looked at Jasper, eyes brighter now, and whispered again, "You're safe." That night, Jasper didn't sleep by the fire. He limped to Wyatt's small bed under the cabin eaves and curled at its base. When Wyatt awoke hours before dawn, the dog was watching the window, ears twitching at every creak, a silent guardian of dreams he couldn't share. Morning came with that eerie hush, the kind that settles after a storm has emptied itself. Snow glittered under a dull silver sky. From the cabin's chimney rose a steady stream of smoke. Inside, the fire cracked softly, but a different kind of tension now filled the room. Peter Mayfield returned just after sunrise. Wrapped in a waxed parka and green wool beanie, he stepped into the mudroom, breath puffing in clouds. In one gloved hand he carried a magnifying glass and a metal brush, the kind used to clean old rifle bolts or worn tools. June opened the door before he could knock. Her robe was thick plaid. Her hair, usually tight, hung loose around her shoulders. Shoulders, a rare sight. "Coffee's hot," she said simply, stepping aside. Peter nodded. "I won't be long." Wyatt sat by the fire again, legs folded beneath him, watching Jasper, who now sat upright, albeit stiffly. The dog's eyes followed every movement in the room. He didn't bark or growl when Peter approached, just tilted his head slightly, ears twitching in mild curiosity. Peter knelt beside him, speaking low and calm. "Hey there, fella. You remember me?" Jasper made no move, but he didn't retreat either. Peter gently pulled the collar forward, revealing the rusted, weather-worn metal tag still affixed to the underside of the strap. He used the brush to clear flakes of dried mud and a bit of resin stuck in the grooves. Then he peered through the magnifying glass. The front still read Jasper in etched block letters, but it was the back he focused on, where time and exposure had nearly wiped away whatever had been carved there. After several minutes of brushing, squinting, and adjusting angles under the window light, Peter exhaled sharply. "There," he said, tapping the tag. "Barely legible, but it's there." "What is it?" Wyatt asked, moving closer. Peter read slowly. "Unit 14, Gunnison Rescue, ID 7D427. He pulled a small notepad from his coat pocket and wrote it down, then looked at Wyatt. "That's a formal identifier. No one etches that unless it's a trained dog. This confirms he was registered." Wyatt said nothing. He looked at Jasper, who now rested his head across his paws, blinking slowly, as if bored by the discussion of his past. Peter stood. "I've got an old contact. Works dispatch for the Western Division. She'll know what this ID means. If there's an active report, a recovery effort, the works." June poured him coffee while he stepped outside to get a signal. Cell service was erratic this high up, but Peter knew the exact slope of the porch to lean against for the best chance. He waited, his breath fogging the screen, fingers trembling, not from the cold but the weight of what he might confirm. A few minutes passed. Then a reply. He walked back in slower than he had left, closing the door behind him with care, and looked at both June and Wyatt. "It's him," he said. "They've been looking for him for over 3 weeks. His unit assumed he was killed in the landslide near Elk Hollow. He vanished during a night operation, part of a search and rescue after an avalanche buried a hiking trail." Wyatt swallowed. "So he's a real rescue dog?" Peter nodded. "Not just real, decorated, one of the highest performing dogs they had. He's credited with at least 12 successful rescues. They called him the Quiet Ace because he worked without barking. Always listened, always found people." Wyatt looked down. His voice was quiet. "He found me." Peter's face softened. "Yeah, he did." For a moment, silence returned. broken only by the steady ticking of the old wall clock and the occasional pop from the fireplace. Then Peter added more gently, "They'll want him back." Wyatt flinched, his mouth tightening. He didn't speak, but his fists clenched slightly in the fabric of his pants. Jasper seemed to sense the shift, lifting his head, nudging his nose toward the boy's hand. I didn't rescue him," Wyatt whispered. "He rescued me, from being alone, from everything after Mom and Dad." His voice broke and he turned away quickly. Jasper stood, wobbly but determined, and stepped beside him. The dog pressed his large head into the boy's side and stood there, still and firm, as if anchoring him to the world. June wiped her hands on her robe, her voice firmer now. "Peter, who decides what happens to him?" "Technically the department, but there are procedures. If an animal is declared missing and then recovered, the unit usually regains custody." He paused, watching Wyatt. "Public opinion matters. So do circumstances. It's not unheard of for a retired dog to stay with the person who found him, especially if the bond is strong." Wyatt didn't look up, but his voice came clearer this time. "I won't let them take him." Peter crouched again, looking Jasper in the eye. "Let's take this one step at a time. I'll keep talking to my contact, see what options there are." He stood to leave, but paused at the door. "This isn't just a dog anymore, Wyatt. He's got a history. That means people might come looking. Be ready." That night after Peter left, June found Wyatt sitting in the mudroom beside Jasper again. The boy had wrapped himself in a quilt and curled close to the dog, who now rested without shivering. The wound on his paw still looked raw, but Jasper didn't seem to mind. His eyes were clearer now, a little brighter. June didn't say anything at first. Then from the doorway she said, "He's got his own storm to carry, but maybe yours and his. They cancel each other out a little." Wyatt looked over. "What if they take him?" June shrugged, her voice low. "Then we fight, but not before they knock." He didn't smile, but he nodded. Outside, the snow began to fall again, but softly this time, more like a lullaby than a threat. By the fourth day, Jasper was no longer the ghost of a dog they had dragged in from the snow. The wound on his front paw had scabbed into something dark and healing, his movement steadier, his appetite stronger. He still limped slightly, but there was a sharpness in his gaze now, like an ember reigniting beneath old ash. Outside, Grand Mesa lay frozen under a pale sky. The forest bowed with the weight of ice. But inside the cabin, the air was warmer, easier, if only for a little while. Wyatt had taken to talking to Jasper constantly, about everything and nothing, about his parents and the old treehouse they built together, about the time he broke his arm falling off the barn roof, about how sometimes at night the cabin felt too big for just him and Grandma. Jasper never barked, but he listened, always. That night, however, Jasper was not calm. It started with the way his ears angled toward the window, rigid and trained. Then came the low growl, rumbling from deep within his chest. Not angry, not frightened, just alert. His amber eyes stayed fixed on the darkness beyond the frost-covered glass, and he didn't blink. Wyatt sat up from the couch. "What is it?" June, across the room folding blankets, paused. Jasper stood now, stiff and bristling, his body between Wyatt and the door. The sound came next. A crunch. Not the wind. Something slower, more deliberate. Something moving across the frozen path just outside the cabin. June grabbed the lantern from the table. "Stay back," she warned. Wyatt hesitated. Jasper didn't. The dog moved to the door with a fluid, limping stride and pressed his snout to the crack between wood and frame. Another growl, then silence. June opened the door slowly. Cold burst in like a slap. Jasper pushed past her and bounded onto the porch, then down the steps, nose low, tail straight. "Jasper!" Wyatt called, rushing to put on boots. "Wait," June said, grabbing her coat. They followed the dog into the trees, just past the tree line. The snow here was untouched. Until now. Jasper circled once, then twice, his body low to the ground. Then he stopped at a thicket of underbrush. tail wagging once, then going stiff. June raised the lantern. Wyatt gasped. Tracks. Not deer, not elk. Wolves. The paw prints were unmistakably larger than Jasper's deep in the snow, but more disturbing. Then that was what came next. A second set of prints, smaller, human, booted, heading in the same direction. Someone's been here, June said under her breath. They followed Jasper a few paces more until he stopped beside a tree near the creek. There, half buried in ice, was something metallic. June leaned down and used a stick to clear it. It was a steel-jaw trap, rusted, frozen, and already sprung. Something had stepped in it before. The snow around it was stained with old blood. This is illegal, June muttered. No one's allowed to set traps this close to a residence. Jasper growled. Again, turning his head toward the thicker trees upstream. Peter arrived the next morning. He parked his truck closer than usual and came in with snow still crusted on his boots. June had already made coffee. She met him on the porch and told him everything. He listened, his jaw tightening with each word. I thought I heard something on the radio 2 nights ago. Movement picked up by a backcountry sensor on Pine Hollow Trail. They assumed it was moose or stray elk, but I'm not so sure now. Inside, Wyatt sat at the table, tracing the wolf prints into his notebook. He looked up as Peter entered. Why? Would someone be out there with traps? Peter sat down heavily. Could be poachers. We've had trouble the past 2 seasons, mostly at lower elevations. They set traps to catch fur-bearing animals, martens, foxes, even bobcats. But those traps don't know the difference between a bobcat and a hiker's dog. He looked at Jasper, who now sat beneath the window, eyes half-lidded but alert. Think he's still on edge? Wyatt asked. Peter nodded. Dogs like him are trained to notice things we can't. Sounds, scents, intentions. If he's acting strange, trust that something's wrong. Later that day, Peter went out with snowshoes and a field pack, tracing the path Jasper had led them down. It took him nearly 2 hours to reach the ridgeline where the creek cut sharp against the old mine road. That's where he found it. A second trap. This one unsprung but recently placed. Nearby, faint in the snow, were boot prints again. Different size. Not heavy work boots. Lighter. Maybe hiking shoes. That detail chilled him more than the trap itself. He flagged the location with a red ribbon and took photos. The Forest Service would need to see this. When he returned to the cabin, Wyatt was outside with Jasper, tossing a rubber ball he dug out of the shed. Jasper chased after it with newfound energy, his gait still uneven, but stronger. Peter watched from the porch, then called Wyatt over. I might have to file a formal report, he said, which means rangers might come up here to investigate. Wyatt looked nervous. Will they take Jasper? Peter shook his head. Not for this. But it does mean more eyes on this area, which, if those traps keep appearing, might not be a bad thing. June stepped out, arms crossed. Let them come. Maybe someone should remind folks we still protect this land. That night, Jasper refused to sleep near the fire. Instead, he lay facing the front door, ears twitching, breath slow and steady, but his body never fully at rest. Wyatt watched him for a while before climbing into bed. Outside, snow fell again, slow, quiet, almost gentle. But beneath the trees, shadows still moved. The storm came without warning. 1 minute, the sky was still, stars poking through the clouds like flickers of forgotten light. The next, it was all wind and snow, howling through the trees, battering windows, shaking the cabin as if something ancient had woken. Wyatt stirred in his sleep, tangled in blankets, the air cold against his face despite the fire still alive in the hearth. Jasper was already awake. The dog stood by the window, muscles taut, ears high. He paced once, back and forth, then turned sharply toward the stairs leading to the loft where Wyatt slept. His breath came faster now, and a sound, a soft, urgent whine, rose from his throat. Then, without hesitation, he bounded up the steps, limp and all. The weight hit the bed. What is it? Wyatt asked. Jasper didn't bark. He gripped the edge of Wyatt's pajama top with his teeth and tugged, not hard enough to hurt, but firm and insistent. Another crack echoed from outside, sharper this time. a splitting sound like the bones of the earth giving way. Grandma Wyatt called out, throwing off her covers. No answer came from below. Jasper moved quickly, bounding down the stairs and stopping at the front door. He turned back and looked at Wyatt waiting. The boy barely had time to jam his feet into snow boots and throw on his coat before Jasper shoved open the door with his body. The cold hit them like a wave. The wind was a wall, and in the dim porch, light. They saw the towering pine near the cabin's side, its trunk cracking under snow and age. And then, like the universe exhaling, it began to fall. Jasper barked once, sharp, commanding, and shoved his body into Wyatt's side. The boy stumbled backward off the porch just as the tree came crashing down onto the cabin, a roar louder than the wind. Snow burst into the air like smoke. Shingles flew, branches snapped. Wyatt hit the ground hard, and for a moment all he could hear was the pounding of his heart. Then warmth. Jasper, panting, curled slightly around him. Grandma Wyatt shouted. June had been asleep in her bedroom on the far side of the house and came through the back door minutes later, wrapped in a coat and slippers. Her face pale, but calm. "I'm okay, Wyatt," she called out. "We're here." Peter arrived the next morning on snowshoes. The road was impassable overnight, and he carried a thermal satchel full of water bottles and energy packs. His breath came hard from the climb, his beard frosted white. He froze when he saw the cabin. Half the roof collapsed, the pine's trunk cleaving it like a lightning bolt frozen in time. Wyatt and June were already outside, clearing snow, stacking firewood on a tarp. Jasper stood nearby, vigilant. "Is everyone all right?" Peter asked, breathless. "We were lucky," June said, "or maybe just looked out for." Peter walked to Wyatt and clapped a gloved hand on his shoulder. "I heard it from 3 cabins down. You were outside?" "He got me out," Wyatt said, motioning to Jasper. "Pulled me from my bed." Peter looked at the dog, who stared back, steady and unblinking. He knew before it started. Peter exhaled. That dog's got instincts most men would kill for. That afternoon, Peter took photos of the damage for the ranger office, but he also made another call, to the local paper in Glenmore. He didn't give names, just the story. The next morning, the town section ran a photo of the snowy wreckage, and a headline, "Rescue Dog Saves Boy in Surprise Storm." Again. The article was short, but the story spread fast. Online forums picked it up. Local stations asked for interviews, but June refused them all. "He doesn't need strangers asking about what he lost," she said, meaning both her grandson and the dog. But the attention brought questions. Who was the dog? Where did he come from? And why had he risked himself for a boy he barely knew? Peter, meanwhile, doubled down with the Forest Service. The traps they'd found, the unauthorized presence near the cabin, the tree fall. It was too much. He requested aerial surveillance and flagged possible poaching activity. "I don't like the pattern," he told June as they sipped coffee in the undamaged part of the cabin. "Someone's pushing boundaries out there." Jasper sat at the threshold, eyes toward the forest. He didn't sleep much now. He watched, he listened, he waited. That evening, as the storm faded and stars returned to their rightful places, Wyatt sat on the floor tracing a map of the woods. Jasper lay beside him, his nose nudging the paper now and then. "Did you always do this?" Wyatt asked softly. "Before me?" The dog didn't answer, of course, but he didn't look away. June stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "You gave him a reason to fight, Wyatt. And I think he gave you one too." 3 days after the storm, the mountain road cleared enough for vehicles to reach the Turner cabin. The stillness that had hung over Grand Mesa was broken by the low rumble of tires on packed snow. Wyatt was by the fireplace, Jasper's head in his lap, when he heard the engines stop. Then came the creak of car doors. Jasper stirred instantly, ears perked, body going rigid beneath Wyatt's hand. Then he stood and padded to the door, nose to the bottom edge. No growl, no bark. But his posture was tall, unmoving. Like a soldier returning to the front lines, Peter was already outside. He'd been expecting them. 2 people stepped out of the lead vehicle. The first was a tall woman in her 40s, lean, posture functional, buzz cut beneath her ranger cap. Captain Leona Sykes, head of Gunnison's K9 Search and Rescue Unit. Her skin was sun-bronzed and weathered, eyes military gray, sharp, quick, not unkind. Her movements were precise, like every gesture had been trained under pressure. Beside her, Officer Marco Ruiz, compact, dark curls, thick glasses. He looked more like a college TA than a ranger, but Peter knew him from the academy, sharp-minded, fluent in 3 languages, including the quiet one between handler and dog. They shook hands with June and Peter, then turned to the cabin. Captain Sykes removed her gloves. "We're here for Jasper." Inside, Wyatt froze. June opened the door. "He's been expecting you." Jasper stood in the center of the room, his body relaxed, posture straight. His tail didn't wag. His gaze stayed locked on the uniformed woman entering his space. "Jasper," Sykes said softly, crouching, removing her cap. "Unit 14, command return." Jasper didn't move. Ruiz tried. "It's okay, buddy. We've missed you." "You did good." Jasper looked between them, then to Wyatt, still at the hearth. Sykes rose slowly. "He remembers." "He doesn't want to go," Wyatt whispered, voice cracking. Peter stepped forward, hand on Wyatt's shoulder. "There might be another way." Sykes turned to him. "You're suggesting a transfer of custody, something like that. The boys bonded with him, they've saved each other. I propose a town hearing. Let the people decide." Ruiz raised an eyebrow. "We don't usually do ownership transfers this way." Peter's voice was calm but firm. "Nothing about this is usual, and I think you'll find the community has strong feelings about what Jasper means to this town." That night, word spread fast. Peter called in a favor with the community coordinator to reserve Glenmore's town hall. Flyers went up. June allowed a photo of Wyatt and Jasper to be posted to the town bulletin. The headline, "Ed, should a hero be sent back or stay where he's needed most?" Turnout exceeded expectations. The town hall, normally used for holiday crafts and budget meetings, buzzed with voices and camera flashes. Every bench was full. Some had read the paper, others heard from neighbors. Many had seen the boy and dog walking the ridge trail every morning since the storm. Peter spoke first, recounting Jasper's rescue, recovery, the traps, the tree collapse, and the instinct that saved Wyatt's life. Then came Sarah Brenner, the school's speech therapist. Tall, early 50s, auburn, braid down her back. Known for quiet strength and fierce advocacy for children. After losing her own son, she'd fought hard for emotional therapy dogs in schools. "I watched this boy speak for the first time in weeks," she said into the mic, voice clear. "Not to cue. Peter, that dog. If that's not rescue, I don't know what is." Others spoke too, stories of animals who chose to stay. But then came the counterpoints. A retired fireman stood. "That dog's trained to save lives. Every day he spends here is one less person he could be helping." Another woman said, "If we all kept what saved us, nothing would go back to doing its job." The room stirred, split. Captain Sykes stood. "This isn't about affection, it's about service. But it's also about honoring what a dog chooses when the training is over." Finally, Wyatt stepped forward. No mic. He didn't need. The room fell silent. "I know I'm just a kid," he said, "but I know what it's like to lose someone and to not be seen. Jasper saw me when no one else did. He doesn't bark or wag or do tricks, but he stays. Every night. In the dark. Just stays. That's what I needed. That's what he gave me. Silence, then one clap, then others, not loud, just real. That night, the town didn't vote, at least not officially. But before leaving, Sykes pulled Peter aside. "I'll submit the paperwork for retirement status. Jasper's earned that right." Back at the cabin, Wyatt fell asleep with his head on Jasper's flank. The dog's eyes stayed open long after the boys closed. Sun filtered through the pines with that pale winter light, warm to the eye, cold to the skin. Snow crunched underfoot as Wyatt walked beside June toward Glenmore for a supply run. It had been quiet since the meeting. No visitors, No arguments, just the slow, strange peace of a mountain catching its breath. Jasper trotted ahead, alert, but calm. His injured paw nearly healed, though he still favored it in the cold. June walked steadily, bundled in a navy coat. She carried a hiking pole, not from need, but habit. A woman carved by weather, grief, and the quiet grit of survival. Since Jasper's arrival, even her silences had softened. They rounded a bend where the trail narrowed along a granite outcrop. The cliff dropped 50 feet to a frozen creek. The path thinned. Wyatt, chasing a snowflake with his eyes, stepped ahead and slipped. "Wyatt!" June shouted. His scream tore through the trees as he slid off the trail's edge. For one frozen moment, stillness. Then Jasper moved. The German shepherd launched down the slope with precision. Snow sprayed in his wake. Wyatt tumbled, one hand scraping a rock, the other flailing. Just before the final drop, Jasper lunged, teeth catching the collar of Wyatt's coat. The weight nearly pulled the dog down with him, but Jasper braced. Paws splayed wide, body low to the slope. He dug in with everything he had, holding Wyatt there, dangling between fall and survival. The boy whimpered, then gasped, clutching the frozen ground with trembling hands. "I've got it," he whispered, voice thin with fear. But Jasper didn't let go. It was Deputy Lana Reeves who heard the scream from a nearby patrol loop. In her mid-30s, sturdy and fast, with a shock of red hair always pulled into a tight braid, and a voice that carried like a horn. She had once been a wilderness EMT before joining the sheriff's department, known for her unshakable calm and fierce determination. She was on snowmobile patrol when the radio crackled with June's panicked voice. "My grandson, he fell off Ridge 7 trail. The dogs got him. We need help now." Lana arrived 10 minutes later with a second responder, Riley Chen, a lanky, soft-spoken park rescue tech barely out of college, always scribbling notes on his waterproof tablet. They approached carefully, throwing a rope down to Wyatt as Jasper held position, eyes wide, muzzle tight around the boy's collar. "It's okay," Lana said gently. "We've got you. We see you, buddy. Just a little longer." They pulled Wyatt. Up first, slow, steady, his cheeks pale, lips cracked from cold. As soon as he cleared the edge, he turned. "Jasper, don't leave him down there." But Jasper was already climbing. Once Wyatt's weight was off his collar, the dog scrambled. Up the incline on his own, slipping once, catching again, then bounding the last few feet. When he reached the top, he didn't collapse. He simply walked to Wyatt and laid his head against the boy's chest. June fell to her knees, hugging them both. Later that day, someone uploaded a video shot from Lana's body camera, showing the moment Jasper gripped Wyatt's coat and held him fast above the ravine. The footage was shaky, but unmistakable. The boy dangling, the dog anchoring, the trust between them forged in frozen breath and quiet heroism. Within 24 hours, the video had over 500,000 views. By the next morning, it was picked up by NBC Denver, then CNN. Hashtags appeared. Jasper the Rescue, Grand Mesa Hero. He held on. Teachers used it as a lesson in loyalty. Veterans praised it as a story of courage. One senator from Colorado retweeted the video with the words, "Not all heroes wear boots." Then came the call. A representative from Mountain Line Broadcasting, a regional TV network, reached out to June directly. Her name was Mara Ellison, a woman in her early 40s with sleek brown hair, glasses that always caught the light, and a warm, practiced tone honed through decades of interviewing families during both crisis and triumph. She requested to feature Wyatt and Jasper in a televised segment called Voices from the Ridge. June hesitated, but Wyatt nodded. "It's not just about me," he said quietly. "It's about him." They agreed. The interview was set for the community center in Glenmore, not far from where the town hall meeting had taken place. The set was simple: a wooden bench, pine backdrop, soft studio lighting. Wyatt wore his flannel shirt and combed his hair with trembling fingers. Jasper sat beside him wearing the navy vest the rescue unit had given him, freshly laundered. Mara kept her questions gentle. "Wyatt, when Jasper grabbed your coat, what did you feel?" "Safe," he answered without hesitation, like he'd do anything to keep me here. The segment aired that weekend, and the story of a boy, a dog, and a frozen cliff traveled far beyond Glenmore. But back in the cabin, where the wind once again hummed through pine branches, Jasper slept curled at the foot of Wyatt's bed. He didn't know about the video. He didn't need to. He had already chosen where he belonged. Spring had not yet come to Glenmore, but the air no longer cut like glass. The snow along the creek beds had begun to melt in hesitant streams, and the trees, though still bare, swayed with the subtle promise of change. Inside the town's small school auditorium, every folding chair was taken. Parents stood along the back wall, cameras poised, and a few reporters from regional stations hovered respectfully near the exits. The stage was modest, pinewood panels. Maroon curtains faded from sun, but the atmosphere was electric. At the center of the room, Jasper, in his deep navy support vest, sat poised on the makeshift stage, his ears alert and gaze calm. Beside him stood Wyatt, dressed in a buttoned shirt and dark jeans, nervously clutching the edge of a paper he had written himself. The crowd hushed as Principal Marlene Crosby, a tall, stoop-shouldered woman in her 60s with a voice honed by decades of hallway duty, stepped up to the mic. "This morning," she began, "we honor not only a student but a member of our greater Glenmore family. Jasper, a retired rescue dog who has saved lives not once, but twice this winter, represents the quiet courage that reminds us what it means to protect one another." She turned, lifting a small blue velvet box and opening it to reveal a silver medal, etched with the seal of the Colorado Search and Rescue Association. She pinned it gently onto the front of Jasper's vest. The room erupted in applause. Jasper didn't move. He only turned his head slightly, eyes settling on Wyatt, who beamed at him like he'd won the world. After the ceremony, in the modest cafeteria lined with handmade streamers and paw print drawings, Captain Leona Sykes from the rescue unit met with June and Peter. Her uniform was more casual today, jacket unzipped, expression relaxed. She extended a folder to June. "Official retirement papers," she said, "filed and confirmed. Jasper is yours now, permanently." Peter, who had started wearing his old ranger's cap again, though unofficial, smiled faintly. "Good to see paperwork catch up with common sense." Sykes nodded. "He chose you. We're just respecting the choice." A few days later, the rain came. It began as a gentle drizzle, washing away the last of the salt from the roads and softening the dirt paths threading through the woods. But by nightfall, the wind shifted, and the clouds thickened into something darker. Rain fell harder, drumming against rooftops and streaming through the gutters. In the hills surrounding Glenmore, the ground, oversaturated from melting snow, began to give. Creeks rose, trails vanished. Low-lying areas near the town square began to flood. Peter, now reinstated as honorary forest warden, donned his old gear for the first time in years. His silver beard glistened with rain as he coordinated with local volunteers from the Glenmore Community Watch. They set out in pairs, checking cabins, warning elderly residents, helping children into high-clearance vehicles. But it was Jasper who noticed the danger first. At the edge of the community center, where an emergency shelter had been set up, Jasper paced uneasily. His ears twitched toward the creek. Then he bolted, leaping over a wooden gate, disappearing into the downpour. Wyatt, soaked and breathless, followed him, with June close behind. The creek had breached the bank near the bend behind the Harris barn. Water surged toward a small cluster of homes whose residents hadn't yet been notified. Jasper stood at the edge of the slope, barking sharply toward the trees. Peter arrived seconds later. "What's he doing?" Wyatt pointed. "He's warning them." There were people, 2 families gathered near the bottom of the hill, unaware of the fast-moving water headed their way. Peter's voice thundered through a handheld megaphone. "Evacuate now, flash flood incoming." They scrambled uphill as water surged through the trail they'd just vacated. It swept away a wooden fence, crashed into a storage shed, and rolled down toward the town's lower fields. But no lives were lost. When it was over and the rain softened into mist, Jasper stood again at Wyatt's side. his coat soaked, his eyes tired but vigilant. He didn't need medals for that moment. He just needed to be there. In the weeks that followed, the story made the news again. But for Glenn Moore, the legend was already complete. Wyatt began writing. At the small desk in the corner of his room, lit by a lamp with a shade that flickered slightly every time the wind kicked the windows, he started page 1 of what would become a children's book. He called it Echo in the Storm. It wasn't just about floods or falling trees. It was about the first night Jasper appeared, about the rusted tag with the name nearly scratched off, about the feeling of waking up in a world that had gone cold, and discovering that something warm, something brave, had chosen to stay. He wrote, "I read your name off a piece of cold metal, but you were the one who gave me warmth first." Peter donated his old Ranger maps for the illustrations. Sarah Brenner helped him with phrasing and pacing. Even Deputy Lana lent her voice for the audiobook version. The story, short and steady, traveled from Glen Moore to state schools and children's hospitals, always with the same lesson. That courage comes not only in the storm, but in the quiet after, when someone chooses to stay. Jasper grew older, slower, but he never stopped watching the window, and Wyatt never stopped writing. And long after the snow melted, the echoes of their story lingered, like soft paw prints in thawing earth. Faint, but never forgotten. Sometimes, the greatest miracles don't come with thunder or fire from the sky. They arrive quietly, on 4 legs, in the middle of a snowstorm, carrying no banner, only a heart willing to stay. Jasper wasn't just a rescue dog. He was a reminder that love, loyalty, and protection can come from where we least expect. And for one lonely boy, he wasn't just a companion. He was an answer to a prayer. Perhaps God doesn't always send angels with wings. Sometimes he sends them covered in fur, with a name barely visible on a rusted tag, and eyes that see straight into our souls. In a world filled with noise, Jasper reminded us of the silent ways God watches over us, that he never forgets the brokenhearted, that he still sends help, sometimes in the form of a storm, and sometimes in the form of a shepherd. If this story touched your heart, let us know in the comments. Write amen if you believe that no act of love is ever wasted, and that God still works through animals, through people, through everyday grace. Share this video with someone who needs to remember that miracles still happen. Comment below and tell us where you're watching from. And if you believe in second chances, in kindness, and in the quiet heroes that walk among us, hit that subscribe button. May God bless you and your loved ones, and may you always recognize the echo of His love in the smallest moments.